fans, thank you for joining me again today. It is Saturday, May 13th, 2017, and it's coming a little late, but this is your UFC 211 preview and prediction show. Sorry if I'm sounding a little nasally, maybe more than usual. I'm on some antibiotics for my tooth. I think it's kind of made me a little stuffy. But we're going to push through. Mouth is feeling a tiny bit better. Got to get some major work done coming up next week. Guess you can't take care of your teeth enough. Because, I guess it's a tough thing. But it's Saturday. Like I said, it's a little late. I do apologize for that. I know I got a whole bunch of you just panning and waiting for the videos to come out, and I do apologize once again. But I am here, and I cannot wait for tonight. And I cannot wait for this next hour, and we're going to go through the whole entire card from Fight Pass prelims to the FX prelims. Keep in mind, the prelims are on FX, not FS1. Not really sure what they have going on FS1. Don't really watch too much FS1 unless there's some fights on or maybe a Yankee game or whatnot. I don't know. Don't watch much television. Only when there's some fights on or The Ultimate Fighter. But before we get into the preview, I'm going to talk a little bit about the nice, huge press conference that they had, the summer kickoff. Now, I would go through every single event that they had gone and talked about, but they didn't have everyone there. A couple fights, obviously, are coming up very soon. You have your Glover Teixeira versus Alexander Gustafsson, which is in 2 weeks in Stockholm, Sweden, I believe. I know it's out there in Europe across the pond. Then, less than a week later, you have UFC 212. Which is going to be headlined by the unification bout between Jose Aldo and Max Blessed Holloway. Excuse me. Sorry, Max. No disrespect there. I love Max, man. He's a great fighter. I think he's great for the sport. He's very funny. He's that whole "Where's Jose Waldo?" I thought that was great. Really brought some attention back. And out of all the 145ers that are left, top guys, even the ones that Conor McGregor has fought, I would definitely love to see a rematch between McGregor and Holloway. When they first fought, that was obviously a few years back. Holloway's a young guy, still really, like a baby in the career, in his UFC career at that point. Obviously Conor only had a few fights in the UFC, but he, Conor's a little bit older, been fighting longer, and a little more, supposed to be a little more mentally mature. It was a really good fight. I guess, Conor explained how he'd hurt in that fight, hurt his knee. But Max fought him well. A lot of that fight was contested somewhat on the ground, actually, and some standing, and it was an overall good fight, and Conor definitely took that unanimous decision. But like I said, Max has come a long way since then, and Conor's been quoted several times, in the media saying, look, if you're someone that has a reach or you have a reach on me, then that might be a little bit more difficult of a fight for me. Not to say that he wouldn't win that fight, because obviously Conor didn't get to where he's at by projecting him losing fights, but he does know that there's going to be a little more of a degree of difficulty in some of these fights. If, he knew when he fought Chad Mendes, he had the range, and he knows how to use his range. It's not just about having that range and having that reach. It's knowing how to use it. Because when you don't have that range, if you don't have the range or the reach, you got to know how to get around that. And there's a lot of obviously great fighters over the years that have been able to do that, in boxing and kickboxing and obviously in MMA. So, it was definitely a very interesting little press conference that they had. Summer kickoff. Dana White wasn't there. They had John Anik doing the public address duties. Starting really to, I've always kind of. Let me start that over. I was never really like a huge fan of Anik. I remember he used to do that show on ESPN with Kenny Florian, and he's really brought himself a long way from there. And I've kind of grown to really enjoy his commentary and enjoy his insight. Smart guy. He definitely works hard. Throws a lot of different, throws some, little jokes in there. A lot of his interviews, I think, and I've listened to the podcast a few times, and I think he does pretty well. I do enjoy his commentary. I think he does mix pretty well with Joe Rogan, and when they throw in Dominic Cruz or DC into that mix, he does seem to do pretty well blending with the three-man team. So, do rag off to John Anik. You do a great job, man, and I hope it keeps up. I'm glad they gave you that opportunity. You definitely deserved it. You worked hard in all your all your positions there at the UFC, from what I've seen. So the fact that you are getting that lead, and seems like that is going to be yours, and they kind of handed that to you in a way, said, hey, here's the ball, see if you can run with it, and I think you're doing a great job. So, like I said, do rag off to you, man, and keep it up. One little thing that kind of does bother me in about some of the intros that you see with the UFC, with a lot of their programming like coming in, and don't get me wrong, this is not a knock on Mike Goldberg, because I've met Mike Goldberg, probably one of the nicest people you will ever meet, and that's not me over embellishing anything. Just a great. I mean, you can tell when you meet him and you talk to him, and you just have that quick, maybe 2 minute, 3 minute, whatever it is, 5 minute type of conversation with him. Now, granted, over the years, a lot of people in the UFC were having to be overly nice to the fans that are there, and you could tell that when you're at events. I've been, like I said, at events since 2009 on. And there's been a little bit of a change with the attitude, obviously, since this new ownership and since the UFC has established itself, a little more is starting to become a major sport, and they're starting to obviously make money, over the last few years. But, you go back 2008, 2009, in those years before, when they were really trying to build that brand back up and to build the sport up and get those eyes on there. There was one thing they didn't want to do, is alienate any fans. So the fighters, the people, working for the UFC, just overly, everybody, this is so nice, which is just, if you ever been to autograph signings for, say a NFL player or Major League Baseball player, whether, say, at a sport card shop or, some type of, anywhere, and they're doing these autograph signings, generally they're, what's your name? John? Oh, thanks, John. Next. They barely look at you. I've met a lot of fighters, over the years, joining when I would go to these fights, I'd obviously join the fight club to get that full access, because, that's what I kind of enjoy to do, and, you meet some of these fighters. A lot of times it's just like meeting them just to say, hey, man, thanks for the entertainment. You do a great job. Keep it safe, and, keep up what you're doing, and I hope I hope all your endeavors work out, and you become successful, and, and all that fun stuff. But, most of these guys are very engaging. Like hey, is your first time going to a fight, or how many fights you've been to? You enjoying it? Blah 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 blah. They ask you questions just like you ask them questions. Most of them, I've had some interactions with some fighters. I'm not even going to name them at this point. That weren't very cordial. They're just kind of like, going through the motions. Maybe they didn't like what I look like. I don't know, but. there's definitely a couple fighters, one of them particularly in the heavyweight division, who wasn't very kind, to me or my buddy when we were there, But he was definitely kind to the people behind us. So, but let's move on. Like I said, I've met so many, and all been great. I mean, actually, it was one of my favorite fighters that I've met. It was I think it was 2010 in Boston. I believe it was 2010. I don't know. Going back years, but some years there. And it was Tom Lawler. Lawler was, this is back, Lawler was still kind of up and coming, middleweight, coming off the Ultimate Fighter, But, funny guy. Just, it was great. He was very engaging right there, just willing to, talk to you. He wasn't even, like, sitting down to an autograph session. I think he was at, one of those booths or whatnot. And, and he was great, like, we took a picture. It was kind of a funny thing, because me and my buddy, we took a picture with him, and I took a picture, and then I took a picture with my buddy with him, and then we were going back and forth. We were like, hey, and then he took a picture with me and my buddy. It was funny. We were all laughing about it. It was great. But Lawler was a really good guy, man. So these guys, they put themselves out there, and they try. Really, hold on one second. I just want to bring back up some of my notes here. But yeah, the UFC has come a long way, and like I said, like I was getting into before I got off on my tangent there, Mike Goldberg was great, and the fact that they constantly using, I mean, you didn't want Goldberg there anymore. You wanted him out. If you wanted to keep him, they would have kept him. But they obviously didn't want to keep him anymore. But they still want to use his voice, which kind of bothers me a little bit on the grand scheme of things when, you're seeing these intros and you're hearing him on the, he got rocked, he this and that, and like, I can understand, they throw in the Rogan voice, but, they need to start mixing in Anik or even Stan or, a few of these guys. But I really believe they should get away from constantly using, especially with these new events and these new promotions and these new promos that they are, they're putting out for, the summer kickoff and UFC 212, UFC 213, like all as they go on. You're constantly you're still hearing Goldberg. Now, Mike Goldberg will probably, for as long as at least I can remember, is still always going to be that voice of the UFC. But, every time I hear that in one of him in one of the promos, I just kind of automatically think, they got rid of Goldie. Like I said, man, he was just such a nice guy, such a great ambassador for the sport. I can't even tell you, just such an engaging guy, the time I met him, he was just, we're sitting there on the corner before the weigh-ins, and he walked out from the side, and I kind of was like, oh, hey, there's Mike Goldberg, hey, buddy, and he's like, hey, and he actually came, started to approach us, came a little close, so we kind of went over there, because it was kind of, looking up, and he was like, so where are you guys from? You enjoying the weekend? Can't wait for the fights. Is this your first time? Blah, 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 blah. And, just talking. And, he was great, man. I'll never forget that. I really won't. And I was really, definitely upset when, when they did not renew his deal or, fired him, I guess you could say. But Goldberg, fantastic guy. I hope, he definitely will move on and be successful. And when he did have that one incident when he did that NFL game after the fact on Twitter and whatnot, but I don't really blame him. Some people you get on, guys on Twitter, man, you can really decimate somebody and piss them off. So I know that's kind of what you're trying to do. But I'm going to move a little closer here so I can check out my written notes, because we are going to start the preview and predictions right now. I'm sorry that little intro went a little long, but this is going to be, I think, a great night of fights. Keep in mind, Fight Pass Prelims. There's 3 fights. Then we have the FX Prelims. They're put the fights back on FX this week. Can't say that too fast without screwing it up. But not on FS1. So, the first fight of the evening. We're going to go over the Fight Pass prelims real fast, real quick. There's a couple fights on here that are pretty interesting. The opening fight is a light heavyweight fight, 205-pound fight between Joachim Christensen and let me just look at this because I was practicing it last night. Gustamarov and Tagilov, and I hope I got that right, man. There's definitely no disrespect. This kid, Gustaman, however you say it, buddy. I'm sorry if everybody screws up my name too, so I know how you feel, and I will get it right at some point. But I like him in this fight against Christensen. In his debut, Antigilov, I'm just going to try the last name. I think that's easier. Won by a submission in about 18 seconds, defeating, by guillotine choke. And he was definitely very impressive. He is 2-1 here. He's 1-0 in the UFC. And he's got a lot of finishes. I kind of like him in this fight against Christensen. Christensen looked good, man. He's actually 6-7. Christensen is he's 6-1 in his last 7, and 1-1 here in the UFC, and he is coming off a win there. But I like Antigilov in this fight. This is the opening fight on Fight Pass, and I definitely can't wait to see it. I kind of think it's going to be a finish, but we will find out. Next fight on Fight Pass is Gabriel Benitez versus Enrique Barzola. Barzola has recently changed camps and gone to ATT. Tyron Woodley. Tyron? Is it Tyron? You're the champ, buddy. I want to get your name right. Tyron Woodley, talking on the preview show, actually was picking him. I'm going with Benitez in this fight. I like Benitez. He's a little longer and taller. He's been able to finish people in the octagon. Barzola is actually, I believe, 2-1. Yeah, 2-1. In the octagon, Barzola, all by decision. He did win his last fight by unanimous. Lost the fight before that by decision, and won his first fight, another one by unanimous decision. So we'll see how this fight goes. I think this fight goes to a decision. But I do think Benitez might take it. So I'm going with Benitez in this. So I think, like I said, I think it'll probably go to decision. So we're looking at that probably a 3-round. So we'll see how that goes. The last fight on the UFC Fight Pass prelims is a women's 115-pound fight, and that is between. Let me just get that back there. Jessica Aguilar. That's correct. Jessica Aguilar. We have not seen Jessica fight since Rousey fought Besh Carrera. Names are hard, people. Names are hard. Back in August of 2016. 2015. That's why we write these things down. Yeah, that's a long time since he's fought. Now, man, Jessica was dominating female fighter for a long time. Got signed into the UFC. Was might have even definitely one of the top 115-pound signings at the time. She was a WSOF champ, and she was on a 10-fight win streak to going into that fight. Obviously, that loss was to Claudia Gadelha. In her opening, and obviously we all know how Claudia has progressed and where Claudia has gone since then, man. She's one of the top, not just one of the top 115-pound fighters in the world. She's one of the top female fighters in the world. Gave Joanna Jedrzejczyk a lot of trouble in their fights, and I really would not be surprised to see them fight again if Claudia can come up and reclean back out the division. But the 115-pound women's division is very deep. Might actually, I know the women's division the women's divisions are still young, but I do think that at least the way that they've been bringing in a lot of these 115-pound ladies to fight in the strawweight division, it's pretty deep, man. It's definitely pretty deep. a lot of these these girls are good, and we got the 115-pound title fight coming up tonight that we're going to talk about in a little bit with Joanna champion in her match, against Jessica Andrade. Excuse me, Jessica. You're beautiful. I love you. Anyway, here we go. Now, Courtney Casey will be taking on Jessica Aguilar in this fight. Now, Courtney is probably one of the more active 115-pound women's fighters. She is coming off a loss, I believe, but she has fought a bunch of times here in the UFC. And her last, she has also has a loss to Claudia. Might even her last fight might have even been a loss to Claudia. You have to recheck that out, but. I like Courtney in this fight. She's been more active. I think there definitely might see some ring rust with Jessica. It all depends on where this fight could stay. Obviously Jessica is a pretty good grappler in her own right. So I don't see this fight. I really think it'll be a tough. It'd be tough to see a finish in this one. I do think we're probably going to see another decision. And I'm going to give this to Courtney because, like I said, she's been a little more active. So I think that she's going to be a little more fresh, in the ring and being used to making that walk and going through the weight cut and just going through everything. Being out as long as Jessica has, even though the experience that Jessica has. And like I said, she was a former, WSOF champ, and she's fought in so many different organizations. But it's been almost 2 years. So, I'm not sure. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know if it was some injuries or if it was this, if it was that, if she had a kid. I really don't know the reason why she sat out as long as she did. You have to assume that it was probably some injuries and whatnot, and you have to also probably assume that she wasn't training that entire time. So she probably got that, re-signed for the fight and came back. But, we'll probably find out all that. I'll try to have most of that, on the review, and we'll see how it goes up from there. But to get to the FX prelims, I'm going to try to move, through these as quick as I can. I don't want to try to keep this in under an hour. It's coming out a little late, so I know, like I said, I know a lot of people been pining for this preview and predictions. I do pretty decent picking fights. That's why I'm doing this, and I enjoy it. I love being out in Vegas for fights too, because then I can at least maybe put a little cash down on it and. Oops, sorry. That happens at least 2 or 3 times on a show. But to get to the first opening fight of the FX prelims, it's going to be James Vick versus Marco Polo Reyes. Now, Michael Vick. Sorry. Dog killer. Anyway, James Vick. Vick is a phenomenal record overall and a great record in the UFC. Only one loss. That loss was to Beneil Dariush. It was a finish. He was KO'd. That was a little while back. He did bounce back against Abel Trujillo and did win that fight. So Vick is a big 155-pounder. He's very tall. And he cuts a lot of weight. He did look super, super drawn out at the weigh-in. Almost reminded me of the James Irvin weigh-in when he tried to make 185 years back, where he was just basically, they renamed him Skeletor, which was definitely an appropriate nickname if you've seen the way he looks. I mean, when you're cutting that much weight, and I don't know how much weight James Vick was cutting, man, but he definitely put on a good smile, a good show, and smiling for the cameras. But you can tell that he was definitely uncomfortable. He did not look good. Now, sometimes I put a little more emphasis on those weight cuts, and sometimes I've picked fights due to how they look at the weight cut. I watched both the weigh-ins, and he obviously looked a little bit better, later on, being able to rehydrate somewhat. Most of these guys, they can't do the IV. They can only hydrate with the liquid because of the rules, unless, sometimes it happens. But he just, he looked real drawn out. And I was really liking Vick up until this point. I'm going to go with Reyes. Man, Reyes is a beast. one sec, as I wrote a couple notes down about him here. Yeah, El Toro, man, he's 3-0 in the UFC. Dong Young Kim, he's got 2 knockouts. He has a unanimous decision win over Jason Novell. His first 2 victories in the UFC were KOs, man. And he's a great little boxer. Vic obviously has the reach on him, but El Toro, I've seen him fight. He definitely knows how to use his range and get in there. And he does have long arms for a little bit of a, for he's not a short guy, but he's shorter than Vic, who is actually obviously very tall. But I kind of like, I'm going with El Toro in this. He looked real healthy at the weight cut. He knows how to finish fights. I think Vic being the fact that he's fighting here at home, he's wanted to fight at home. Sometimes guys have problems with that due to the fact that there's so many people they know just bothering them, or you're having to deal with everyone from that area that you might know, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm gonna go, like I said, with El Toro in this. I believe that the next fight on the FX Prelims is a heavyweight fight. And we have Chase Sherman against Rashard Coulter. Sherman is 0-2 in the UFC. It's tough, man. It's tough to fight heavyweight. Anybody can knock anybody out at any time. But, like I said, he is 0-2. He has lost to Walt Harris and Justin Ledet. And he's a pretty good sized guy. Obviously, this is probably, he's fought in Legacy, I believe, but this is probably his last shot at kind of staying in. Even though the heavyweight division is really thin, really similar to the light heavyweight division, really thin, top heavy. I don't think the UFC is going to keep you in starting 0-3. There's not too many, more guys that you can keep throwing up at you. But Coulter is making his UFC debut. He is a beast, man. This guy looks like a beast. He looks like just like this one of those little, like friggin' buildings that you see. He's 5'11", I think 240 or 235, or he weighed in at. Big guy, tatted up, local guy. Just looks like a beast, man. And looking at his record, he has knocked everyone out that he's fought. So, even though this is his debut, sometimes, these guys can... He's a Texas-based fighter. He fought the last couple fights in those Texas-based promotions. So he's fighting, basically fighting at home. But I'm going with Coulter in this. I think Chase Sherman is gonna start his UFC career 0-3. Probably have to go back to the regional circuit and maybe get some wins out, and hopefully hopefully he's able to do that. But I just got a really good feeling about Coulter in this fight, and I think it's going to be a knockout, and I think it's going to be pretty quick. I don't see this going past. I think it's going to be like 7 minutes. If it gets into the second round, I don't see it going too far past that. But I do see Sherman probably trying to wrestle and keep Coulter's power away, because obviously the guy's 10-0, I believe. What is it, 10? I had the records written down. Yeah, I didn't know why I didn't write his record down, but that's screwed up. What are you gonna do? He is definitely. I'm excited about this fight, and it's the second fight on FX, and we'll see how that one plays out. Get it. So I got to clear that throat there, people. All right. So let's move on to what would be the next fight on the FX Prelims. It's been so long since we've talked FX Prelims. But it's going to be an exciting 145-pound fight between Jason Knight and Chaz Skelly. A lot of people are calling it could possibly be the fight of the night here. This is the third fight on the FX Prelims. These guys are Skelly is a 6-2 in the UFC. He's had a loss to Darren Elkins. He's on a 2-fight win streak. Jason Knight, on the other hand, has won 3 in a row. And he's got wins against Caceres, Dan Hooker, and Jim Eilers. He did open up his UFC career with a loss to Kyrajiri. I guess Chad Skelly has a pretty interesting story. He's actually 17-2. Both these guys have real similar records. Knight being 16-2. So each have one loss there. Each have a couple losses in the UFC. Skelly was 11-0 entering UFC. I guess his mom met Dana White at some barbecue. Told her about her son. Dana White went and checked out his fights. Obviously, he won the fight he went to see. Was impressed by him. He signed him. He's been in UFC ever since. He's got 8 fights, man. It's a lot of fights in the featherweight division. So he's been going around a while. This one I'm still kind of up in the air on, but I think I'm gonna go with Skelly on this. It's kind of a toss-up. I really didn't know where to go with it. These guys are real similar, real close, man. It's gonna be a barn burner, and it's really even hard for me to maybe even predict the outcome on this. But if you got a gun to my head and I have to predict, I'm gonna say Skelly by submission in round 2. So we'll see how that goes. But this next fight, which is the premier event of FX Prelims, if I was near my mixer, I would definitely have some music going. But we're going to have some changes to the show coming soon. I got some new stuff coming in. I can't wait for it. Now, the main fight on FX Prelims. Unbelievable Eddie Alvarez, the former 155-pound UFC champion, coming off a loss to Conor McGregor in November after defeating RDS, who had defended the title a few times and was looking at some point like he might be dominating that lightweight division. But Eddie Alvarez, man, basically almost took his head off in that fight. Going against Dustin Poirier, man. I like Poirier a lot. One of my favorite fights of all time is Dustin Poirier against the Korean Zombie Chan Sung Jung. Great fight. That was a great fight. Dustin ended up winning by submission in that fight. Very rare submission that doesn't usually, you don't see too many people pull off in the octagon. It was a great fight, man. And Dustin has fought a lot of great guys, man. So this is not going to be no easy fight for Eddie, but I do see Eddie taking this fight. Eddie has seemed to me like he's been a little up and down since he came into the UFC. He lost to Cerrone, beat Melendez. Obviously, came back, was able to beat RDA, and lost to Conor. So, Eddie being, 2-2, I think, now in the UFC, or just not having the record that you would think he might have. He's getting he got a lot of his opportunities because of his past. Man, Eddie's been around forever. He's a fantastic fighter, even a better guy. I like Eddie a lot. He's one of my more favorite interviews to watch or listen to. In MMA. He has a lot of great stories. And he's been around forever. Now, I don't know if that's going to affect him a lot in this fight. I do still like him in this fight. I really do. Dustin has fought a lot of great guys, but most of those top upper echelon fighters that Dustin has fought, he hasn't beaten. He's beaten some good guys. Obviously, he's beaten Korean Zombie, and he's gotten to where he's at. He's I don't have all his fights right in front of me, but he's definitely won some good fights, and he's lost some, but he's lost to Conor. He was just knocked out by Michael Johnson. Sometimes it seems like anytime you get into that, really, especially now in the lightweight division since he moved back up, which he does look a lot better in the weigh-ins, just looks so much more comfortable. Excuse me. Oh yeah, by the way, I do want to mention this for Dustin. He is donating, I believe, either his entire win bonus or show money, and it's definitely a part of his purse, if not all of his purse, maybe all of his show money, to a food bank in Lafayette, Louisiana. I believe it's Lafayette, Louisiana. I think that's great, man. That's such a selfless act. So, give it up for Justin. Give it up for Dustin. We, not many fighters do that. He's recently moved back to his home state from Florida, from training with ATT, and he's moved back to Louisiana. I guess it seemed like he was getting a little homesick from what he was saying. Not his exact words. But him and his wife. So, like I said, I like Dustin a lot. I just don't see him winning this fight. I could be wrong. This is going to be a tough fight to see. You don't want to see anybody get hurt, obviously. These guys train so hard, man, and they're trying to entertain. They're trying to make a living for themselves, and I respect that so much. If the sport came around a little longer, a little earlier, in my youth, I probably could have got into it a little earlier too. But like I said, I was at that age where it just kind of passed me by. I just didn't jump into it early enough, and I wasn't into too many mixed martial arts when I was in my teens or whatnot, like a lot of these guys. So hats off to them. I like Eddie in this fight. I think Eddie actually will probably, for some reason, I see Eddie submitting him or knocking him out. I just see him finishing it. I do. I think Eddie's really hungry. I'm really hungry to get back and to kind of redeem himself for that Conor fight. Now, if Eddie still has a lot of fights left in him, which he believes he does, and a big part of me believes he does as well, even though there's a lot of these experts that think he's kind of past where he's at. I still think he's got some fight left, and I think he's got another run in him. So Eddie's a smart guy, man. I've seen him fight live in Bellator, and like I said, it just didn't look like him in that Eddie fight. In that Conor fight, it didn't look like himself. So let's see. Hopefully, he can redeem himself here. Like I said, Eddie probably knockout or submission pretty early, within the first 7 minutes. This fight shouldn't go too far into the second round. Now, drum roll, please. That's a shitty drum roll. Sorry for the swear. We got to do at least one, I guess, in the episode, but we're keeping it family friendly here. Family friendly show. Now, are you all ready? The main card. UFC 211, Dallas, Texas tonight. I believe it's American Airlines Arena. The first fight of the night. Unfortunately, the first fight of the night was supposed to be Sergio Pettis versus Henry Cejudo, a 125-pound contender fight. Cejudo had lost to Demetrius Johnson. Sergio Pettis on a great winning streak. He's starting to come into his own. Really young fighter. Got into the UFC at a young age. Had some bumps in the road, but now he's back. He's doing very well. I was so excited to see this fight, but Cejudo got hurt. I believe he broke his hand. I hope his recovery recovers quick and hope everything goes good for Henry. He did have to pull out, unfortunately. Seemed a little late to be pulling out, but, these things happen. I know Henry Cejudo. I don't know him personally, but I do know he's a wrestler. He's an Olympian. The freaking guy, I think, won a gold medal, So he didn't get to where he was at in that aspect by pulling out of things. So if he's hurt, he must be really hurt. And I just wish him a speedy recovery. As for Sergio, I feel so bad for him. I know that he trains super hard, and it's such a mental game that him and his brother, Anthony Pettis, everybody knows that. Those two are super tight. And, I know from an interview that I heard with Anthony, I believe it was on the MMA Hour, he was, definitely looking forward to coming out here with his brother and getting this, getting that fight under their belt against Henry, and that would have definitely propelled Sergio into the, definitely propelled him into maybe some title talks, but that didn't happen. And the fight was canceled a little so late they weren't able to find a replacement for Sergio, but I'm sure he'll bounce back, man. He's a mentally strong kid, and he fights at a great camp. He's got some good people around him, so I hope he just lets this roll off his shoulders, and maybe they can reschedule it for another time, or at least get Sergio in on one of these cards coming up, man. He deserves it. You know, hopefully he didn't have to go through the whole weight, too much of the weight cutting process. So, but the fight that is replacing that is a 185-pound fight. David Branch is returning to the UFC after a not-so-stellar first stint in the UFC. But let me tell you something about David Branch, who is fighting Krzysztof Jotko. This is a really good fight for the 185-pound division. So let me make sure I get these stats right, people. David Branch's last loss was to Rumble Johnson in Titan FC 22, which was about three years ago. I mean, that's when Anthony was still working his way back into the UFC. And obviously, we know Anthony has since moved up to 205 and, you know, just ran through a whole boatload of light heavyweights. Probably one of the, you know, Anthony Johnson, one of my favorite fighters when he just retired a couple weeks back after that loss to DC. Just it's a total shock. But good for him, man. I know he's hopefully happy with his endeavors. He gets out of the fight game when he gets out. So that, you know, that's all good to me, man. I would never criticize a fighter for retiring if that's what you don't want. I mean, it's a dangerous game that they play. So if he's done playing that dangerous game, all you can do is sit back and thank him for what he's done. Because if he's entertained you for that amount of time, for those years, if you were entertained by his or her fights, how could you be mad at the guy? So David Branch is on a 10-fight winning streak, has won 10 in a row since that loss. He has held titles simultaneously at WSOF at 185 and 205. Now, some people like Michael Johnson might call WSOF a C League. Sure, it's definitely not an A League. I wouldn't go as far as calling it a C League. You know, a B League, probably. They definitely had some good fighters in the WSOF, some strong champs. You know, you got two of those champions that are now in the UFC with Justin Gaethje, who the UFC just signed and will be fighting Michael Johnson in the TUF finale coming in June. By the way, after this, we're going to get into the fact that Cody Garbrandt might be pulling out of the TJ Dillashaw fight. We're still going to obviously be doing the reviews. But to get back to Mr. Branch, man, he's got wins over Yushin Okami, Jesse Taylor, Clifford Starks, and much, much more. Many, many more guys in that 10 in a row. Those are just some of the bigger names. He has looked really good since he's left the UFC. I did see David Branch fight. I believe it was at UFC 116. I mean, this is going back. But he has improved himself so much. Really has. And it was really, really great to see him finally get back into the UFC. He's a product of, he's a local New York fighter, I believe. I know he's, from around the way there. And I do like him in this fight against Krzysztof Jotko, who's no slouch himself, believe you me. Jotko, 6-1 in the UFC, has won 5 in a row, and wins over Tandem Corey Tor Trung. He's a good fighter. He's got a good record. His only loss here in the UFC, and his only loss, period, is to Magnus Selenbad by guillotine choke. So, other than that, this should be a barn burner to open up the fight. I do like how they have been positioning some of these fights. Putting Eddie and Dustin on that main Premier FS card was a good thing. I mean, neither one of those guys minded at all. They're both smart guys. They know that they're going to get some serious eyes on them. To put David Branch and Jotko on the curtain jerker, man, the first fight of the pay-per-view, I think that's a great thing. That's definitely going to get the crowd kind of warmed up. Branch used to seem like he was a little bit boring of a fighter, but he's definitely turned it around some and starting to put himself out there a little more. I don't mean to say he was boring, but just sometimes it's kind of a little plain on how he would go about things while in the ring, and but now he's putting himself there. He's not just putting himself out there throwing stupid punches but he's going for submissions. He's doing well in the striking. He's trying to keep his game everywhere. I like David Branch in this. I think it'll probably be a decision or a sub. For some reason, I do see Jocko getting caught by Branch. Branch is a phenomenal jiu-jitsu black belt. I believe under Henzo. I believe he trained under Henzo. So, he barely, you don't see him go back to his jiu-jitsu. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, wherever that fight takes it. I like Branch in this fight. Submission, round 2. Frankie, the Answer Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez. Rodriguez is probably one of the most highly touted up-and-coming fighters here in the UFC. I mean, he was given that fight with BJ Penn. I don't know why BJ took that fight. I do know why BJ took that fight. It's because BJ doesn't turn fights down. And I really blame the UFC and the matchmaking on this, and a little bit kind of blaming Dana White for not kind of stepping in and going, why are you putting BJ Penn against him? Unless that's what Dana White wanted. You never know. But Frankie is not, they're putting Frankie against this guy. It seems like they're trying to get Yair to take Frankie's place in the rankings, being that Frankie has fought for the title more times than we can even count. Right? I mean, he's fought twice for the 145-pound title. I guess you can say somewhat close fights against Jose Aldo, but obviously Jose won those fights. Not many people are willing to sit there and argue the fact that Frankie won those fights. They weren't like overly... Jose wasn't overly dominant, I don't think, in either one of those fights. I know in the first fight I definitely would give him the nod. In the second fight, I thought Frankie did pretty well in the second fight. I just obviously didn't do well enough. It's all about... Jose basically was controlled that striking, and did not seem like he was in too much trouble at all at any point in that fight. He did land some shots on Frankie. Frankie's bounced back. He's beaten Jeremy Stevens, which I kind of thought that, I thought Stevens would maybe see if he can test Frankie's chin. Frankie's got an incredible chin. He's never been knocked out. He's never been submitted, but he's been through some wars, man. And, I love Frankie, man. He's great. I've been watching him fight for so long. I remember when he first debuted, in the UFC. This kid from Jersey, he was just moving and not a very big lightweight, but just beating everybody, man. And his transitions from striking to the takedown is one of the best I've ever seen. I mean, Frankie Edgar and George St. Pierre, in my personal opinion, have the best striking to takedown transitions in MMA of anybody. George St. Pierre is the best with his timing. Obviously you see him come in, he throws, boom, next thing you know, he's taking you down. Nobody knows what's going on. Frankie gets that same type of action, I think, going on. I'm picking Frankie in this fight. Yair, obviously, has had some big wins in the UFC. He's very dangerous. He's a very diverse, diverse striker, throws knees, throws a lot of different things. He's starting to come into his own with his power. Earlier on in his career, he did have some knockouts, but he did get away from it for a little bit. I think as he started to fight a little stiffer competition, he wasn't getting as many finishes. But he's definitely developed. He's in a great camp. And he's, he's improved a lot in every aspect of his game. Now, will he be able to do a lot of those things against Frankie? Frankie's not as slow as some of these older fighters that Yair's fought. I think this is obviously going to be his toughest test ever. Frankie is not done yet. If Frankie wins this fight, and he wins it impressively, and Max Holloway wins against Jose Aldo in a few weeks, I do not see how they don't make that fight. But I do also see the UFC just kind of sick of giving Frankie Edgar these title shots. That's just kind of, it seems like the attitude, because when you ask Dana White about, sometimes you ask him about these certain fighters, and he's fought so many times, and he just gives you those answers where it just makes you think like, man, Frankie ain't gonna get another shot. But Frankie, I'm going to take Frankie in this fight by decision. That's how Frankie wins most of his fights. He does finish people, but he also just totally outworks you. And I think we're going to see that again. Moving along. Now this, I'm just going to sit down really quick for this one because moving along. The reason why I'm sitting down for this one, people, is because this is the Demian Maia Jorge Masvidal fight. And let me tell you, y'all are going to think I'm crazy picking against Demian Maia. But Jorge has looked like he's just finally come into his own. And he's just running with super confidence. You know, if you're going to finish Jorge Masvidal, it's probably going to be by submission. You're not going to knock Jorge out. I don't care. Unless you got, you know, unless you're pumping basically steel plates into your gloves. And probably even then you're not going to knock out Jorge Masvidal. That's a tough SOB, man. And he's been winning. He's won a few fights in a row. He's got that win against... Obviously, is that win against Donald Cerrone. Took Cerrone right out of title contention. Right out. He hit Cerrone so hard that he put him right back into that freaking Robbie Lawler fight, which is happening at UFC 213. So, Demian Maia has been on an absolute tear since coming into the welterweight division. I really believe that the UFC is apprehensive about giving him a title shot no matter what, because his last two losses in the welterweight division were to two guys that are not in the UFC anymore. One is over in Bellator by the name of Roy McDonald. The other is Jake Shields, who's in WSOF, which is soon to be the Professional Fight League or something like that. Jake, you know, the fight between Maia and Shields, it was basically a straight up grappling match, man. That fight could have went either way. Judges gave it to Jake. You know, what are you gonna do? You can't really argue at this point. You know, it's a few years back. Maia has definitely Maia's won 6 in a row since then. And those aren't just 6 in a row. Those aren't fighting. That's not like Demian Maia fought me and then fought my neighbor. Demian Maia, sorry about that, people. Demian Maia has beaten Carlos Condit. Let's go over this here. Carlos Condit, rear naked choke. Matt Brown, rear naked choke. Gunnar Nelson, unanimous decision. Neil Magny, rear naked choke. Ryan LaFleur, unanimous decision. Alexander Volkov, Yakolev. I can't read my writing, so I'm sorry. I'm a little dyslexic, I think. Unanimous decision. And like I said, I'm really not surprised with that loss on February of 2014 to Roy McDonald. That fight really hurt Demian Maia, even though it was 3 years ago. If you look where Roy is at now in Bellator, fighting Paul Daly next month. And if he wins, obviously the winner of that fight's going to get the winner of Lawrence Larkin versus Douglas Lima at Bellator NYC. Demian Maia is going to have to beat Jorge Masvidal. Demian Maia is probably going to have to win another fight very impressively. Unless Tyron Woodley basically jumps out and decides that, you know, he wants to fight Maia and demands to fight Maia. I don't know who the UFC would match Tyron up with, you know, say, you know, if Maia won, who else they can do without really pissing a lot of people off. I do not think they want to give him a title shot. That's one of the big headlines. One of the big headlines. One of the big things that they were talking about, I believe Ariel Helwani talked about it when he was doing his little way, the morning weigh-ins. And he did not give it. They said, hey, if he beats Jorge Masvidal, he's not guaranteed a title shot. And I'm generally when they say that, maybe sometimes they're trying to throw people off. Maybe they might already have the contracts printed, and they're just waiting for this fight to go. Maybe the winner of this fight is going to get a title shot. Maybe they do give it to Masvidal if he wins. You know, I mean, that's an interesting fight. I mean, you got two guys that both trained ATT and were training partners, and Tyron was a coach and whatever he did over there at ATT. So, interesting. Just very interesting. I want to see where this lands. Sometimes the outcomes, the aftermath of the fights are sometimes even more exciting and more than the fight itself. And that's not to say, because obviously we watch these fights because they're, freaking super exciting. But I think obviously if, I'm not going out on a limb here, Damian Maia wins, it's going to be by sub. And if Jorge wins, he's going to knock him out. Because if Damian Maia can't get this to the ground, Jorge's just going to be landing some shots, man. And he's going to be landing shots at all angles and all positions. And it's going to be one of the toughest striking battles that Damian Maia's ever been involved in since, he fought Anderson Silva. But, Maia is a big welterweight. Obviously, he's coming down from 185. He never cut much weight from 185. I believe he cuts less than, I think he walks around 190 in that area, if that. 192 or 93. I remember him saying sometime in an interview that he only had to cut like 7 or 8 pounds to get to 85. So he figured if he dieted a little bit and got his body down a few pounds extra, then to cut to 170 to maybe to walk around to 183 and maybe just cut about 13 pounds or somewhere in that range to get to 70, that he can still do that and hold his strength and be successful. Now, obviously he has been able to do that so far, but he did have some tough weight cuts. Masvidal might have had a little bit of tough weight cut, had to come in with the towel. So we'll definitely see how that goes. There was somebody else that had to come in. Yeah, that was Vic. So yeah, Vic came in with a towel, was, all covering up his nuts and stuff. But it was like, hey man, the towel's like almost, at your chest. Anyway, Vic he looked like Skeletor. So I gotta stand back up for the co-main, people, because like I said, that Damian Maia Jorge Masvidal fight just had to have me sit down, man. Because when that fight jumps up, I'm gonna be eyes glued. Now we are into the co-main event of the evening. I'm not even going to use my notes for the co-main event or the main event, and I don't even know, so I'm just going to talk about it. I'm going to try to keep it down. I know we're getting in there. We're getting close to an hour, so wow. Oh, Joanna champion, undefeated here in the UFC. Jessica Andrade. Can you believe, man, Jessica used to fight at 135. She's like shorter than I am. And part of me wants to believe that there was a 125-pound division. She'd probably be owning that. She did pretty well at 135, even though she was just basically outsized by everyone. Obviously did have a couple losses or she wouldn't have moved down. But some good wins. And she's definitely some great wins in the 115-pound division. That's why she's getting that title shot. I think Joanna, your Jedrzejczyk is going to have a tough time with Jessica. And don't be surprised if we hear and new UFC strawweight champion. Because that's who I'm going with in this fight. I'm going to pick against Joanna. It's never personal. I love Joanna. She's great. She's fantastic. I think she's beautiful. I think she's smart. She's athletic. She can fight. I love both these girls, man. And I think they're going to put on a fight. Probably be fight of the night. But I have a feeling that Jessica's going to submit her. One thing that Joanna has some trouble with sometimes is her wrestling. That's why she did move to ATT. Being able to keep it standing, though, is definitely one thing she's great at. So, But, you know, Jessica's a little bit of a different animal, I think, here. So, I'm picking her in this fight. I see it going by submission, maybe somewhere in the third round. I don't see it really happening too quick. I see the first round being kind of a filling out process between the two. I don't see them like going all willy-nilly crazy on each other right away, but I could be wrong. It's definitely going to be a great fight. It's going to be a war. Hopefully these ladies can, hopefully we'll see every aspect of the fights, of MMA in this fight, because both these ladies are great at just about every aspect. I mean, like I said, Joanna's wrestling's a little suspect, but she's not like she's horrible at it. She's very well rounded. She wouldn't be where she is at if she wasn't. Her forte is striking. Jessica's not a bad striker in her own right, but I just have a feeling that when it comes down to it, Jessica's a bulldog, man. And I think if she can get in there and get inside and get to Joanna and take her down and, control her there on the ground, there's going to be a problem. And I don't know how long, Joanna's going to last trying to defend herself on the ground. If Joanna keeps it standing, obviously, it's going to be a long night for Jessica, even though Jessica's a really good striker in her own right. If you look what she did against I think Angel Hill, was it? Yeah. So, taking Jessica. I'm not really confident in that pick because I do love Joanna, but I just think, it might be time, man, because this is an interesting fight. And now, it is the main event of the evening. 5 rounds in the UFC heavyweight division. Stipe Miocic versus Junior Dos Santos. One former champ, the current champ Stipe. These two fought, 3 years ago? Great fight. I rewatched it recently. The first time I saw it, I thought Junior won. The second time I saw it, I thought Junior won. The third time that I just recently seen it again, I thought Junior won. Close fight. Not to say that Junior won hands down, that he dominated, because he didn't. These guys battered each other. I never would have expected a heavyweight fight to kind of go that way, the way these guys were just tagging each other and tagging each other and tagging each other. Now, the most interesting thing going in here is so many people have there's a lot of people picking JDS, basically because of his last fight. And since JDS lost to Kane, his last loss to Kane in that 5-round war decision, which was, it was incredible. He's alternated wins and losses. I believe, and obviously one of those wins was versus Stipe, one of those losses versus Overeem. And, alternating those wins and losses, Junior has not been able to find any consistency. His last fight was against Rothwell, where he looked fantastic against Ben Rothwell, dominated Ben Rothwell. I didn't see that happening. I thought Rothwell was going to knock him out. He had just come off his loss to Overeem, and I really thought that, Junior has a lot of miles on him, man. These guys have really... Stipe's actually a year older than Junior. Junior's got 4 more fights, but the mileage on Junior is obviously so much more than what we have on Stipe. So much more. And I think Stipe is going to be the first man to defend the heavyweight title more than 2 times. I like Stipe in this fight. I even think you might even see Stipe finish him in this fight. I do see Stipe not going too crazy in the beginning. Maybe calculating a lot and not holding back, but definitely holding some of his energy in and not going, totally crazy balls out in that first round. But I do not see this one going 5. I kind of have a feeling that Stipe is going to knock him out somewhere in the 3rd round. I could be wrong, man. Junior's doing really great defensively as a fighter and moving. His footwork, believe it or not, has gotten a lot better. I think he's always had great hands and great boxing and great footwork, but Junior's is gotten a lot better. He's, I think he's training over at ATT again now, and I think that's maybe helped him a lot. But like I said, he's been back. He's been with ATT for a little bit. He's still alternating those wins and losses. Now, Stipe is not lost. I think it's a 6-fight win streak, 5-fight winning streak since his loss to Junior. This is gonna be a good fight. It's always tough for two guys to match that first fight when you've had to fight a year type of fight like they had in their first fight. Just look at Tyron and Wonder Boy. That first fight was great. Started off a little slow, but obviously turned into a fantastic fight. The second fight, they were both just sitting there knowing what each other can do and just a little apprehensive on pulling the trigger. I don't see that much apprehension in this fight with JDS and Stipe, but I also don't see them having the war like they had before. I think we might see a little more stuff on the ground this time. Maybe by Stipe, maybe by Junior. You never know. Junior might try to change it up and take him down. He does have a little bit of a grappling background, being from Brazil. Obviously, his forte is the boxing and the stand-up and the kickboxing. But this should be probably about 3 rounds, and don't be surprised if it ends on some type of ground and pound to where Stipe's on top and throwing some shots in there. Junior's a tough guy to take down. Don't get me wrong, very tough guy to take down. I would have loved to see him fight Brock back in the day there. I thought that would have been a good fight. I thought Junior probably would have won that fight. Being that his boxing was just obviously his stand up is that much better, but and he's really good at the sprawl and because he's great at the takedowns. But I think Brock would have been able to get him down. Being that King was able to do a lot of those things to him as well. Let's see if Stipe can. I think that's the key to this fight for Stipe, is keeping it standing and then getting him down, obviously when he's least expecting it, making Junior feel like, giving Junior the impression that this is going to be a stand-up fight, and then as it starts to get tough either way, he takes him down. Even if he's winning the exchanges, I think Stipe needs to get Junior to the ground. Stipe is a good wrestler in his own right, and was a Golden Gloves boxer, man. He's very well-rounded. He knocks people out, though. Will he knock him out? Probably. Could it be by submission? Probably. I do see Stipe winning this. Junior's still looking for that consistency, and alternating those wins and losses over the last few years. It's a tough thing. He's got a lot of miles on him. He's been in some wars, coming off from recently being knocked out by Overeem. Not to say he is not able to recover from that, but we'll see how that goes. So, just to wrap it up, go over my picks again real quick. We'll start from the bottom. I like Antigilov. I think he will get by some type of finish, either knockout or submission. Gabriel Benitez over Barzola. Richard Coulter over Chase Sherman, and that will be a knockout. Courtney Casey over Jessica Aguilar. Should be a good fight. Aguilar coming back off a long layoff, but Courtney has been so active. I think she's going to be so fresh. James Vick versus Marco Polo Reyes. El Toro. I like El Toro in this. Looked like a tough weight cut for James Vick. Chaz Skelly, Jason Knight. Both these guys are really similar fighters, similar records and everything. I'm going with Chaz Skelly. Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier. Poirier is a tough kid, man. Great fighter. This is going to be a great fight. I think Eddie rebounds. I like Eddie. David Branch, Christoph Jocko. I think Branch finally gets another back. I think he wins this fight in his comeback fight to the UFC. Frankie Edgar over Yair Rodriguez. I cannot pick against Frankie Edgar. Damian Maia for Masvidal. I'm going to go with Jorge. It's more or less wishful thinking. I think I said that earlier. Tough to pick against Damian, but I'm going to go with Jorge. I like to see if Jorge wins. I'd really like to see him get a title shot. And out of the 2 title fights, like I said a couple minutes ago, out of the 2 title fights, we're going to have one champ is going to retain his title. The other champ, I feel, is going to lose the title. I like Andrade in this fight. I think she's going to work her wrestling in and possibly even submit Joanna. So that's we're going to have a new UFC strawweight champion. Thank you very much. Sorry. Been going a little long. And finally, in the main event, I like Stipe in this fight. I don't think it's going to go past 3 rounds. I think Stipe finally finishes Junior in this, and I think he redeems his fight from a few years ago. Now, thank you all for a minute. If you made it this far, please hit that thumbs up. If you like the content, hit that subscribe button. Please share the videos. Share it to everybody. I don't care. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Instagram. Share it wherever. Just share the video. Get it out there. I'm going to keep coming out with videos. I got a review coming out tonight. I'm Mark G, 203 Fight Network. It's Saturday. Make sure you watch UFC 211. It is live at 10 o'clock. The prelims on FX, not FS1. FX prelims start at 8. Fight Pass prelims 6:30. I'm excited. Review coming up tonight. I'm going to be doing that as soon as these fights end. If I can get it to go live, I'm going to get it to go live. But other than that, hit that like button, hit that subscribe, share the video. I'm Mark G, 203 Fight Network, UFC 211 preview and predictions. I'm out.